especially up front.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Brower Center. I am Lori Rich. I am the Executive Director of the David Brower Center. We are a nonprofit, and our mission is to be a home for the environmental movement. Show of hands, who has been here before? Oh my gosh, okay. So then I'm not going to talk about what we do, but I hope everyone checks out the exhibition that we currently have, Sea Change, which is showcasing the work of some really amazing Bay Area artists. So since you all have been here and you know what we do, I think I'll talk about sort of why we do it. And there's a story I like to share, actually about an artist that was in one of our jury shows. And he came to visit me for a meeting, and he said he loves coming to the Brower Center because when he walks through those doors, he feels like he's getting a hug. I was like, wow, that's cool, and why? Because I'm not out there giving free hugs on the regular, right? And he told me, though, that when he first moved to the Bay Area, he had started a job that was not at an environmental or social justice organization, and he really had no friends. And he didn't know where to go to find like-minded people. And he loves that when he comes here, he knows he's going to find people that have the same values that he does, that care about the same things. And that's pretty special. That's different than going to the bank or going to the grocery store or even going to your office, I guess. And there's a lot of power in that, I think, because there's a lot of power in community. It's knowing certainly you're not alone, but I think it also, more importantly, gives us hope. And hope is important. We hear so much gloom and doom these days, and to know that other people care about the same things that you do, that are working to change things that you want changed, and they're actually succeeding in that change is really important in this movement. And I find so much hope that you are all here tonight to learn about this really important issue. And then I have a hope that you find some hope tonight, but also some inspiration, and maybe even motivation to get involved and to do something. I'd really like to thank Hernandez, who is here with us tonight. She is an artist. She's on the Berkeley Art Institute. I had no idea about any of this, actually, until she introduced me to the Community Water Center and said, you guys should do an event. So this would not be happening tonight without her. And I'd like to thank the Community Water Center, certainly, for being our partners on this event. Amazing co-hosts. Again, this event would not happen without you. I'd like to thank the, yes, exactly. Kids Sierra Club of the San Francisco Bay chapter, who has also been really great at marketing and promoting this event for us. We had a phenomenal RSVP turnout. I expect a lot of people will be arriving late to attend, which is awesome that so many people want to hear about this. I'd like to thank all of our panel this evening and all the speakers that are here that are sharing their time and their expertise to really inform everyone about what's going on. And I'd like to thank all of you for being here and for supporting this important work. And I'd like to share a quote from David Brower, who's the namesake of this building. I'm happy to tell everyone who he is at a later time, but if you don't know. But he said, have a good time saving the world. Otherwise, you're just going to depress yourself. So let's also have a good time tonight. And now I'm going to introduce Jennifer Clary, who's with the, oh gosh, shoot.
Clean Water Action.
I'm sorry, Clean Water Action. I knew that part, but there's more. The Water Programs Manager for Clean Water Action, based out of the Oakland office. She's a longtime advocate for community water solutions and an expert in groundwater and drinking water policy. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about this evening and give us the lay of the land. Great.
Thank you.
Okay, now it's working? Oh, awesome. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to introduce this great panel to you, but just kind of want to frame what we're going to discuss tonight first. First of all, who gets their water from East Bay Mud? How about SFPUC? Anybody get their water from a small water system or a private well? Not about 4 of you there. Great, so it seems like most of you get your water from a large, well-run water system. So maybe we need to tell you a little story about not everyone in California gets their water that way. There's actually 7,500 water systems in California, and 3,000 of them deliver water to homes. Those are called community water systems. And of those 3,000, 2,200 serve less than 1,000 people. And that's a very small percentage of California's population. Like any water agency will tell you, 95% of Californians have safe drinking water. But do you know what 5% of California is? It's 2 million people. And we estimate, so we say that 1 million people don't have safe drinking water. And we think that, and there's a lot of suggestion that maybe that's not the case. Clean Water Action has a lot of members in the Bay Area, and we often send out emails about safe drinking water. And I tend to get at least one phone call or email back saying, that's not true, you shouldn't be exaggerating. But so what we're here tonight to talk about is what's not an exaggeration. So we're really hopeful and excited this year that we're going to get a permanent solution to safe drinking water because Governor Newsom, 2 days after his inauguration, took his entire cabinet to a community that doesn't have safe drinking water, Monterey Park Tract, which is about 50 homes near Modesto. And he said, he came out with that number, 1 million people don't have safe drinking water, and this time Politico did a fact check of it. And they found out, yeah, it's at least 1 million people, and it might be more. So we're going to talk a little bit, and try to put a personal face on it, explain to you why we don't have safe drinking water, what we can do to make it happen. So I want to start by recognizing our awesome panelists today. First, immediately to my left is Susana Diana, co-founder and executive director of Community Water Center based in Visalia. And I've known her for about 15 years. And, you know, Barack Obama wishes he was as good a community organizer as Susana Diana. That's all I can say. But I'm glad she decided to stay here and not run for president. And then Lucy Hernandez is the former president of the West Goshen Water Company, and she's a member of AGUA. And Todd Robbins, I'm sorry. And she's actually the matriarch of 3 generations of water advocates. So she is the face of tomorrow. She's creating new activists for the next century, which I think is really exciting. And Todd Robbins is a private sector attorney. He's an environmental litigator, a nationally recognized expert on 1,2,3-trichloropropane, and he's represented water systems and groundwater contamination cases involving nitrate, perchlorate, PCE, MTBE, all sorts of man-made contaminants. And everyone give him a hand to Todd. So what we're going to do tonight, I guess I'll sit down now. I usually like to stand up. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to start out by giving you a little background on these folks. They're going to talk to you a little bit. And at some point, we're going to open it up to questions. If you have a question after the first round, we'll let you ask your question, and we'll make sure that everyone gets time. We'll be doing this for about an hour and a half, and then we'll have a little time to socialize afterwards so you can ask one-on-one questions as well. So Susana, why don't you tell us about why you founded Community Water Center in Agua and what they are?
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. Susana de Anda, the reason the center was established 12 years ago was because California had a really dirty secret. Clean water flows towards money and power. It was really clear to us early on, 12 years ago, that many residents in the Central Valley lacked safe drinking water. And when I say safe drinking water, I'm talking about water you can drink from the tap without the fear of becoming sick. And on top of that, we realized that people had very little, if any, no information on water quality. So what was happening, and I'll make it quick, I was door knocking. Oiga, ¿usted toma el agua de la llave? Do you drink your tap water? No. Why not? Ay, pues nadie la toma, pero es que nos podemos enfermar. The story was the same. I don't drink it, but I don't know why, but I just don't drink it, which is probably a good thing. Because the areas we started to door knock were areas where people had high levels of nitrates. And that's a contaminant that many of us know, but it's coming from 3 major sources of contamination: fertilizer, chemical fertilizer, animal manure, and septic tanks. Now, you know, I will say nitrates are linked to cancer, the blue baby syndrome, things you don't want to be exposed to. But what's really scary about nitrates, in addition to what I just said, is it's got no smell or a taste. The water comes out clean and clear. So unless you know what's in your water, you're not going to drink it. So that was really key for us as we were door knocking, understanding that residents had no idea why they should not drink the water. So for us early on, it was all about access to good information to make the best decisions for you and your family. That story was consistent throughout the valley. So the center spun off from another mother organization called Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment, based in Delano. Luke Cole was an amazing litigator. We spun off the water campaign to fund El Centro Comunitario por el Agua because of a need, because we realized we needed to leverage all resources and education to ensure that all residents would have safe and affordable drinking water. So our center was based because we had to do it. Now, the center has grown because California has this big problem. In addition to that, we also co-founded a sister-armed coalition called AGUA, which stands for Asociación de Gente Unida por el Agua, People United for Water. And that coalition, I gotta tell you, that coalition is led by impacted residents. We've been meeting for 12 years every month. Who does that? Impacted residents who want change. That's who does that. We've been meeting for 12 years every single month. Lucy is one of our key members. Now, what's beautiful about the coalition is that the way we have set it up, the coordinating council is set up so that residents are voting members, and we have some other voting members in the audience as well. They guide the strategy. Nonprofits that are part of the coalition, we provide guidance, so it's guided democracy, but we have no voting power. So it's truly guided by people affected by the problem. And it's made up of young people, mothers, elders, amazing activists like Lucy, and other nonprofits like Jennifer Clary's group. That's the reason the coalition was born, to ensure that we had a consistent space to have residents come and have this consistent campaign to address the regional root causes of why we have this crisis. So I hope you guys ask, where is all this coming from and why do we have this reality? Gracias.
See what I tell you? So one thing I want to say is we don't just have a problem, we have solutions. And so I want to talk to Lucy. Lucy, why did I introduce you as the former president of the West Goshen Water Company?
Thank you. Yes, I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you a little bit of my community at West Goshen and Tulare County. I've been living in the community for the past 13 years, and I am very happy to tell you that because of all this work that Community Water Center has done and our coalition for our community was able to connect to the city of Visalia. So now I could say that we have water, tap water in my house, and safe drinking water for our family. And this is something that I've been trying to be engaged in the Aqua Coalition, because I want everybody to have the same opportunity that West Goshen had, to be connected to the closest city, or to find a solution for everybody in California. We have the right to safe drinking water, and I think that it's time to everybody to be part of the solution. So I would like to invite all of you guys to be part of the solution, and let's do this for our communities, because our communities are the poorest families in California, and we are the ones paying double for water, because we had to pay water for our water bill, plus we still had to purchase safe drinking water for our families, which is water bottle too. And it's very sad for us to tell our kids not to drink a lot of water when they're supposed to drink water, because that means another trip for us to the store. So I'm very happy that we got connected to the city of Visalia, but I want other communities to be able to have the same opportunity that West Goshen had. Thank you.
Todd, what's a private sector lawyer like you doing here with a bunch of nonprofits?
Well, lawyers are people too. I appreciate the question. I built my career and my law practice around trying to help solve at least an aspect of the drinking water crisis that we're here to talk about. You know, we've heard it said already by my esteemed co-panelists, everyone has a right to safe and affordable drinking water. California law says so. It's called the human right to water. And in fact, both of my co-panelists, I believe, were involved in helping to pass that law. But the problem is making water safe to drink costs lots of money, lots and lots of money. And when the state sets drinking water standards to protect our health, the burden falls on local water agencies, local water systems that supply our water. The burden falls on them to build and operate the treatment facilities that are necessary to clean the water and meet those standards. And even in a small rural community, a treatment facility can cost millions of dollars to build and millions more to operate over time. What's worse is while wealthy communities enjoy pristine water flowing out of the mountains in many instances. The poorest among us are drinking often water that comes from groundwater sources, which are vulnerable to contamination. And so the poorest among us are drinking the dirtiest water, and they have the highest costs of cleaning that water up on a per capita basis. So at the end of the day, instead of clean and affordable water, or safe and affordable water, people in communities like Lucy's are often faced with the impossible choice, or seemingly impossible choice, of clean or affordable water, one or the other, and that's a choice that nobody should be forced to make. And so the good news is that water systems, as opposed to individuals who have plenty of political power and organizing power and an ability to affect change on the policy level, water systems have the ability to affect change in court. They have property rights to their groundwater that enable them to bring litigation against responsible parties who cause pollution. And that's where I get involved in helping water systems bring cases, and more water systems, especially in poor disadvantaged communities in the Central Valley, are turning to the courts to shift these ridiculously high costs of clean drinking water to the wrongdoers, the big corporations that cause these problems in the first place, and that way achieving safe and affordable water for people in communities. So that's why I'm here. That's what I do.
I want to just take it back to Lucy for a minute. Lucy, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the passage of the human right to water, what it is and what it meant to your community?
It meant a lot to our community because at that time we were struggling with our well. It was failing, so there was days that we had no water in our community for our residents, almost 400 residents. We were without water for days, and it was very hard to survive with our family. We had to go to the city with our other families to use the restroom, to shower, because we had no water for days. So this is why I got involved with the Community Water Center. Since I've been a member of our coalition for the past 11 years, because I think this is important for us. We could make changes if we step up. I did it for my community, and I'm doing it for my family, because even though I live in Tulare County, I have relatives all over the state. So what benefits one community does not benefit everybody if it's not a statewide solution. So I'm involved, and I got involved with the Community Water Center because we needed solutions. And I'm very, very, I know it's hard for our family like myself that I go to Sacramento a lot to advocate for our communities, that we need to make this law that became into law years ago, and to make it, how do you say it? Like, implemented, yeah, that it hasn't been implemented, so it needs to be implemented because everybody has the right to safe drinking water. And I think by being in our coalition, it showed me, even though I was the president of the water company, when I got involved with the water company, Me Too Water Company, I had no idea what I was gonna be doing. So Community Water Center was a key to our solutions because they guide us to every process that we had to go. We were the first community to get water bottle delivered to our homes because I was involved with the Community Water Center and our coalition. So this is why I'm still advocating, and I don't mind coming to Sacramento, but it's been too long already that we've been trying to pass this to be enforced. Like, we don't want to be coming back for the same thing. We need a solution, and we have the solution already. So let's call our representatives to pass this fund, because we need to pass this fund for everybody. This is our long-term solution, and this is what we need to do for California. It's time to put our people first. So I do ask you guys to call your representative and say that that you support this fund, because this is good for every Californian. This is good for everybody. So this is why I'm involved.
So I agree they're all phenomenal, but I need you to be careful about how often you applaud, because I can't get through all this. And I really want to ask Susana about all this stuff she brought with her. especially this awesome pipe
Sale.
and this gorgeous water. You know, we can refill those for you here if you like.
No need to. Here, I like to, can I move yours? Well, I'll just, yeah. So I like to actually show the problem that we're dealing with, the reality that we have right here in California, and to kind of reinforce what Lucy just said. And I'm just going to talk. You guys can hear me, right? Yes. So what we have in California is we have polluted water. Our source water is polluted, and it's going through old and dilapidated infrastructure, pipas, infrastructure, and then it gets to people's tap water, right? And then you pay for a bill. That is the story, and that's what we have right here. So this is an old pipeline that some great water engineer, which I'm mocking, had the greatest idea to use an old petroleum pipeline for a water distribution center. The community of Plainview. This used to be petroleum. And for a long time, it was used to deliver water to residents. Now, this is a very symbolic piece because many of our systems delivering tap water, contaminated tap water in many cases, are old and dilapidated. So when we talk about operations and maintenance, keep this in mind. It's a real pipeline. And carry it everywhere I go. Then we have water, right? Water being pumped through this type of infrastructure. In some comunidades, people tell me, oh, I know where there's a leak in the pipeline because we just see weeds growing. That's true, because it's old, right? Poor pressure as well. So then we have polluted water. By a show of hands, staff, do not answer. Which water bottle do folks think is safer to drink? This one or this one? So if you think this is safer, raise your hand. Okay, if you think this one's safer, raise your hand. Okay, those of you that believe, Art, come on now. Those of you that raise your hand for this one, why do you think this is safer? That's right, looks can be very deceiving. Looks can be very deceiving because unless you know what's in your drinking water, I wouldn't drink it. This is actually worse than this. This is safer to drink because of the contaminations we have here. We have manganese and sulfur, so it smells like rotten egg. It's threatening. Aesthetically, I wouldn't drink it, but if I was forced to, this is a safer one to drink because this has nitrates. We just talked about nitrates. Nitrates can cause cancer, the blue baby syndrome, and looks are deceiving because you look at this, you think you can drink it, and it's got no taste. So what we're having in the Central Valley, these 1 million Californianos that are exposed to toxic water, they're having some major issues, things like this. Now, as a water advocate, I would say, God, I wish that contaminated water, really bad one, would come out like this. Because it's right away, it's very offensive, you stay away. But the majority of Californianos get water that looks like this. TCP, arsenic, nitrate, it looks like this. So it's important that we have good access to water quality. On top of that, people are paying some of the highest water rates for toxic water. So some people, like Lucy's family, have old infrastructure. It gets the tap water, you can't drink it because now you don't have to drink it, but you still have to pay a water bill. Over $90 for toxic water. And then Lucy just said, on top of that, you gotta go get bottled water to avoid drinking that type of contaminated water. If you boil water with nitrate, what happens to the concentration, Jose?
It concentrates.
It increases. So some of our heads were telling me, oh, Susana, you know what? I just boil the water, then I can drink it. And I was like, oh, okay. You boil it, it makes it worse. It might kill bacteria, but it increases the concentration for things like nitrates. That's the reality we have in California. And I can tell you one more thing. It's very clear who has that type of water and who doesn't. The center believes clean water should be a basic right and it should never be a privilege. But it's a systemic problem. We have systemic racism that is very evident when it comes to drinking water in California. If you're low income and you look like me and you live in the Central Valley, you're going to have higher chances of having polluted water. That's wrong. Because I don't know about you guys, but I know all humans need to survive on safe drinking water. All Californianos need to have safe drinking water. That is why the human right to water that Lucy talked about, AB 685, was finally passed to law by Governor Brown, but the original bill, 1242 from Ruskin, it got to the Senate and the Assembly, and Arnold blocked it, vetoed the bill. That was the original human right to water. And he vetoed the bill saying, oh, I'm not going to sign it because it's going to open up the whole state for liability. Lame excuse, because we can sue all we want, doesn't mean we're going to win. But, you know, as organizers and advocates, and because that's the reality we have to live in, plus our schools too, we have kids that live in that reality, go to school, they can't drink tap water and have to come back. Because of that, we consistently continue to ensure that we pass the law, the human right to water law. It's the first one in California, it's the first one in the entire state. And the United States of America. California is the only state with a human right to water. I can tell you one thing, we should be pretty embarrassed. Right. It's very indicative of the conditions we have. And it's wrong. That Duper water, the brown one, when we addressed that community, the board president told me as an organizer 10 years ago, what are you guys complaining about? It's brown water for brown people. I can drink it and I'm not dying. And we can say, well, you can drink it, but we don't have to. But we can help the board have adequate resources so that we can have safe drinking water. So that's the reality of what we're having in California. And to treat these types of contaminants, it's very expensive, as Todd mentioned, but it's doable. We can solve this issue because we caused it, right? So we'll have a test at the end of the day. Just kidding.
Okay, before we open up for questions, I actually want to ask Todd, because you're like the leading expert on 1,2,3 trichloropropane. How many people here know what 1,2,3 TCP is? Oh, wow, quite a few, but not a majority. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it and what you're doing to help communities?
All right, that's great. I'm happy to do that. Before I do, though, I want to give you both and your organizations credit for the fact that so many hands just went up, because I can guarantee you that 2 years ago, the number of hands that would have gone up in answer to that question would have been about 1 or 0. 1,2,3 TCP has been a dirty, dark secret affecting groundwater in the Central Valley for a long time, but only recently have people been learning about it. Only recently has the state of California turned its attention to it and created a drinking water standard limiting the amount of it in water. And maybe I'll start there. It is a groundwater contaminant. 3 things you should know about it. It's not naturally occurring, so that if it's in water, somebody's responsible for it being there. Didn't get there by any act of God. Number 2, it is incredibly persistent. We have had experts in our litigation involving this contaminant do site-specific studies throughout the Central Valley region and have calculated half-lives for this chemical in local groundwater conditions ranging from 1 to 900 years. So it's not going anywhere fast. And then worst of all, it is a very potent carcinogen. The only chemical with a more stringent standard in California for drinking water is dioxin, which was the active ingredient in Agent Orange. So that should tell you something. The standard is 5 parts per trillion. It's hard to get your head around what 5 parts per trillion means, but it's 5 gallons of water in Lake Oroville, or 5 drops of water in, I think, 20 Olympic swimming pools. It is a unfathomably small amount, and the state believes that at that point it is unacceptable to have TCP in your water. So it's not good. It's not good. And maybe this is great news, maybe it's horrible news. It's standard operating procedure in this country, though, where we have story after story of corporate disregard for health and well-being and the environment. But the reason TCP is in groundwater throughout the Central Valley is really tragic, and it could have been prevented. It was an impurity, a completely unnecessary ingredient in soil fumigants that were used in very, very heavy quantities from the 1950s through the 1980s. The fumigants were produced by 2 huge companies that are still with us today with very deep pockets, Shell Oil Company, Dow Chemical Company. And they knew by the 60s and certainly by the 1970s that 1,2,3 TCP was not only a completely ineffective garbage component, as they called it in their own documents, but they also knew that it was persistent, unlike the rest of the product. They knew that it was carcinogenic. They knew that it was going to impact local water systems, and they did absolutely nothing about it for years and years. Dow eventually cleaned up their product. By then, it was too late for many of our poorest communities in the Central Valley. Shell never cleaned up their product and then eventually got out of the market with a memorandum to corporate executives that getting out of the market isn't going to shield us from product liability cases. And that's where I come in. The good news is it's in hundreds and hundreds of wells. It is a scourge, really. People really only started testing for it relatively recently, but it's being found in rural communities where soil fumigants were used for decades. Big surprise. But community after community is turning to the courts, bringing cases, And the beautiful thing is a water system, I mentioned this earlier, a water system has property rights in the water they pump. They don't technically own that water, but they have the right to use it. It's a valuable property right. And just like if somebody crashes a car into the side of your house or into the side of your car, if somebody damages your property, you can seek compensation in court. The same thing with water systems, and that compensation could be the cost of installing an expensive treatment plant to remove this from drinking water, as well as the cost of operating and maintaining that over the many years it's going to be in the water. So more and more communities are filing these cases. I've been working on litigation like this for 15 years now. We have now seen more than 20 communities recover in grand total hundreds of millions of dollars from Dow and Shell, and there are at least 60 more cases to go, and probably that number is just going to keep growing as the testing continues. So this is a great example of shifting the high costs of safe water to the wrongdoers who caused the problem, and an opportunity to really get out of that dilemma of safe or affordable water.
Great. So I think I'll open up to any quick questions from the audience right now. Right here up front.
Is 123 TCP still being used in the farms?
No. Shell took their product off the market in 1984, and Dow, by the end of the 80s, had cleaned their product up entirely. Farmers still use Dow's product, but it doesn't contain TCP anymore. So this is a problem based on past conduct. But again, because it's so persistent, it's going to be a problem we're dealing with for a long time.
All the way in the back, Martha.
I realize that there's a lot of focus on the Central Valley with 123 TCP because of the current agriculture, but there was a lot of agriculture in Santa Clara Valley. There's a lot of agriculture over in Livermore. Certainly a lot of agriculture in Southern California. Are those areas experiencing the same problem with 123 TCP?
Not to the same degree. There are a number of communities in Southern California that are struggling with the problem, especially in the Inland Empire, where there was a tremendous amount of citrus and other agriculture. Places like the city of Chino, which is still fairly agricultural. So San Bernardino County, parts of LA County are experiencing it. We've seen much less in the Salinas Valley and along the San Mateo and Monterey coast. There are a few detections here and there. There's one water district in the Santa Cruz area that I work with that has TCP in one well. I think part of the reason is, even though the fumigants were used pretty extensively on all kinds of crops in all kinds of places, including outside of California, the Central Valley is uniquely and disproportionately affected because of the hydrogeology there. It's a huge sandbox, essentially. It is so vulnerable to groundwater contamination compared to other places where groundwater moves more quickly, is flushed out, is more connected to surface water sources. There are a variety of technical scientific reasons why TCP may have moved out of the system even if it had been applied in other parts of the state.
Over here.
What sort of concentrations are you measuring in those locations?
Which locations? In the Central Valley?
In the Central Valley?
Some wells are just a little over the MCL. Some wells are many times over the MCL. MCL means the maximum contaminant level. That's the drinking water standard. Sorry for the alphabet soup. They're really ranging from close to 5 parts per trillion to into the hundreds of parts per trillion. It depends on how shallow the well is. It depends on what kinds of crops were grown in that area. For example, just to put a little flesh on that, if you're in an area, say in parts of Kern County where cotton was king, these fumigants were used year after year after year at like 20 gallons an acre. And you see 50, 70, 100 parts per trillion in large municipal wells, even hundreds of feet deep. In other areas where it was more grapes or fruit trees, and the products were used a little less frequently because these were pre-plant fumigants. They were toxic to plants, just like they're toxic to people. So the farmers would fumigate the ground and then plant. So for a long-standing crop like a grapevine or a tree that's in the ground for a long time, the usage was more sporadic. You might see lower levels in those places. But with the MCL being the equivalent of the detection limit, 5 parts per trillion, all you have to do is detect it above that limit and you're out of compliance.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, please.
Just to put perspective of what that means in people's lives, we've been testing in private wells, and specifically in the Central Coast, we've detected TCP and 6 times the maximum contaminant level for nitrates. Why that's kind of scary is because, one, you shouldn't drink the tap water, but exposure to TCP is, you get that by showering. It's the fumes from the water. So we have multiple ways of exposure, and folks are not responsible for that, but we're subsidizing that through our health. And I think it's also important to recognize that our homes and schools should be the safest place for humans. But yet, many of our communities and our kids, that is not the safest place. And on top of that, clínicas, our clinics in the Central Valley, we had a pilot project where we had to install taps in clinics because they had arsenic at the clinic where you go to get healthy because you're going to go to the doctor. If you were to drink the water at the fountain at the clinic, it had arsenic. So that's the reality that we have. And it's conditions that no one needs to be exposed to. And as Todd mentioned, if we contract the polluter must pay. And that's important. However, there's other contaminants that it's pretty hard to detect where, who did that. But at the end of the day, we really believe that all Californians can be part of a solution to ensure that we can implement the human right to water.
I have a question in the very back row. Yeah, you.
Two questions, if you don't mind. I'm having a hard time getting my head around this notion of water systems having property rights. If you just walk me through that in terms of, is it the utility, is it the people, who gets indemnified, and what does that look like? And the second one is, in terms of cases of law, are you seeing that the type of pollution influences the type of legal case versus point source versus non-point source, for example?
No, those are some great questions. To answer your first question, the plaintiffs that I represent are, when I say water system, I'm talking about the entity that actually pumps the water and delivers it as a service to residents in a community and businesses in a community. So a community services district, a public utility district, a city, a water company, a mutual water company, or even an investor-owned water company. Anyone who has a well and is pumping that water into what is called under the Safe Drinking Water Act a public water system and delivering that to the public, and has more than 25 service connections, or I guess more than 15 service connections as a public water system. So anybody in that situation who is required to comply with drinking water standards in order to do that is a water system, and they have they have the property rights to use that water. Anybody who has a well has property rights in the water they pump. But it's the public water systems who are actually required by regulation to supply safe drinking water. You might be surprised to find out that homes with their own domestic well have no regulations whatsoever in terms of water quality. Nobody requires them to test or to comply with any standards. There are disclosure requirements if you sell your home, but other than that, it's purely voluntary. So the work that I do is focused entirely on what we call public water systems that have these property rights. The second question is certainly the ability to pursue a cost recovery drinking water contamination case against a responsible party will depend entirely on the type of pollution. The 1, 2, 3 TCP cases, certainly where the theory of recovery is tied to the past use of these fumigants, those would be a non-point source case. You're talking about non-point source pollution. For those who don't know that term, point source is a leak or a spill from a discrete place into the ground, into the environment. A non-point source is a diffuse source of contamination, like application of a pesticide to farm fields all around, or a fertilizer. So when you're dealing with agricultural pollutants, you're often dealing with a non-point source.
So I see a bunch of questions, but I want to pull it back a second and ask Lucy another question, because I think something very important that we're forgetting is that Lucy is the face of a public water system. I don't know, how many of you remember who you voted for the East Bay Mud Water Board? You have voting rights. You vote every 4 years. And those people sit on it, and I really applaud their public service. They spend their time, they study up on issues, they have to go to meetings every other week, vote on issues. But Lucy, how many paid staff did the West Goshen Water Company have?
None. We were all volunteers. So I still volunteer.
And so how many board members were there?
It had to be 5 members.
Yeah. And so you did everything.
Most of it, yes.
So you did the bookkeeping.
We had somebody to do the bookkeeping because it was something that I didn't want to be involved, and we had to have somebody else, hire somebody.
And you had to hire someone to operate your water system because that's
Yes.
required.
Yeah, but our operator was one of the volunteers, so he would do it voluntarily.
Yeah. So, and you have to comply with every single regulation that East Bay Med has to comply with.
Yes, that's correct.
You're pretty amazing, Lucy. Just want to say that that's pretty amazing. Okay, so let me see, show of hands here. There's a huge number of you. I'll take you, Michael, and then wander up to you and you.
Well, this is for Todd. How does that property right that was recognized for public water systems, how does that square with the public trust doctrine in California?
I'm not sure I totally understand the question. It's different from the public trust doctrine.
Oh, yeah, But when did that property right come into being?
It's been there for a very, very long time in the context of water rights. There's a very hard to pronounce word, usufructuary, which is the technical legal term for the right of a appropriator to pump groundwater or to pump actually any water, to use water, as distinguished from owning property. And the courts have recognized going all the way back, to the 30s and 40s at least, that in the context of water rights litigation amongst different competing water users, that the right to use water is a protectable interest in property.
Michael, we're not going to continue that because I got too many people waiting in line, but you'll have plenty of time to talk
you about it
afterwards.
afterwards if you're interested.
Yes, you're next, and then you, and then you.
You mentioned that Governor Newsom went out early to that community near Modesto. I'm just wondering what his response has been in terms of commitments so far, and whether you think that's sufficient, what else you want him to do.
So the governor stated a commitment to safe and affordable drinking water. He's put a commitment to spend, I think, $175 million in this year's budget. Some of that came from a water bond that was passed last year. He's made it a priority for his water secretaries, both the Secretary of Natural Resources and the EPA Secretary. He appointed a new water board member who happens to be Susana's former co-founder. Laurel Firestone, who is probably the preeminent expert in safe drinking water in the state. Forgive me, because she has a law degree. That's the only difference. So he's made a big commitment. He's also put language in the budget to create a safe and affordable drinking water fund. How that's going to come out with negotiations, we don't know that. But he's made a very substantial commitment, and he's repeated it time after time in public forums. And I think that's really important because we've been saying 1 million people don't have safe drinking water for years, but never got published in Politico till he said it. So I think we're really happy to have his bully pulpit. You.
Two questions. One, I don't think you've said specifically, but are the claims you're bringing common law property-based claims based on water law, or are they Safe Drinking Water Act claims? And second, is there data on the number of people who are served by federally unregulated drinking water systems, like private wells, who are impacted by contamination? And is there any type of thinking around policy to address issues faced by people who get their water from those systems?
Well, let's start with you doing the first question and you doing the second question.
Great. The quick answer is in many of the groundwater cases that I get involved in, and especially in the 123 TCP cases against Dow and Shell, the primary claims are common law tort claims based on property damage, products liability. In the same way, if you got hurt by a pharmaceutical or were hurt in an accident because of a defective car part, the allegation is that those fumigants were defective products that caused harm.
Yeah. Great question on the private wells. currently, after the Human Right to Water law was passed, the State Water Board created a Human Right to Water portal that I encourage everyone to go online and look at it. And it kind of shows you all the almost 300 systems that are out of,
It's actually 320 right now.
so now it's over 300 systems that are in current violation of safe drinking water standards. And you'll notice these stars, they're heavily in the Central Coast, in the Central Valley, highly concentrated, but they're throughout the entire state. Now, that tells us public water systems in violation. It does not highlight the over 2 million private wells that the state has. As Todd mentioned, it is your responsibility to test your drinking water. So we have no data for those. Some of us, we've been doing some testing of private wells, but we can't do over 2 million. But the reality is, if you own your private well, we encourage you to test for it so you figure out what's in your drinking water, because currently we don't have good data on that.
And one of the problems with nitrate is if you tested your well a couple years ago, nitrate has a tendency to increase over time, so you need to keep testing. Over here, I think it was you, right?
Actually, it ties right into that. I was curious how the private wells are reacting to all of this movement. Are they excited? Are they pushing back? How do they react to these sorts of requirements transitions towards more testing? And then if Lucy could talk more about her experience transitioning your small company into the bigger water supply, I'd love to hear more about her experience.
Go ahead.
For the requirements for private wells,
Yeah.
it's not like there's more requirements. We're just urging domestic private homeowners, test your well. There is very little resources. We have small funding that we've been able to test a couple of wells where we actually test for 7 constituents, 7 different types of contaminants, and then we're able to give the homeowner, look, this is what you have. Then the question is, now what do I do about it if they're like really far? So we need to figure out a short-term solution and then figure out that long-term strategy. Many times it's bottled water delivery, right? But I urge domestic well homeowners or renters, test your water, because if public water systems have a problem, more likely the private wells will too. So they don't have additional requirements. It's voluntary. They should.
Are they excited about it, or are they like meh, or are they?
Well, it depends on how you do the outreach, right? Our constituents, our base is low-income people of color. So we target those areas. And I can tell you that if you inform a homeowner on their water quality, they're not just excited, they want to have change happen. And they're like, I didn't cause that, so how do we fix that? Yeah.
So Lucy, tell us a little bit more about the transfer and what it took and how long it took.
West Goshen's well was built back in 1969, which it was, I'm 50 years old right now. And we started having problems with our well. It was breaking down. That's when we had no water for days. And then after that, our well collapsed. And then when they fixed it, they ran the water, and then it came out positive, like high levels of nitrates. So that's how we got more help through self-help to find a long-term solution for our community, because we couldn't do another well because the backup well was as bad as well. So we had no wells. And then to build another well in the community, it was going to be more expensive than connecting to the city of Visalia. So that's how we apply, and it took like 4 years for our process to be connected to the city of Visalia. But that was like the best thing that happened to our community, to be connected, because now we have a dependable, reliable water.
And so we'll get back to questions in a minute. So Susana, when we're thinking about taking 4 years to get safe drinking water, is compared to other folks getting safe drinking water, is that a long time or a little time?
The 4 years to pass the human right to water?
For her to get safe drinking water for
Oh.
West Goshen.
It's
is
too
that
long.
compared to
That's
other
too long.
communities?
I think a month is too long.
But how long is it taking other communities?
It's taken decades. Unfortunately, we're still working with residents and communities that have had no safe drinking water for over decades. So Lucy's example is really quick. And also the East Porterville community. Many of you heard of the East Porterville drought. We had over 300 wells going dry. Residents had to go to the portable showers outside the church. I mean, the conditions that the state had our residents exposed to is just not okay. That stuff will not happen in Hollywood. And that's frankly what Governor Newsom said in Monterey Park Track. Now, I will say 4 years is fast, but it's too slow. It's too slow for our communities. And as Lucy mentioned, clean water is a human right. So it's critical that we think about short-term solutions that are not long-term strategies, right? So we need to correct this big problem.
Can I add something real quick? And plus, in our community, not the whole community is connected to the city of Isela. We have a lot of private wells that couldn't connect because the line wouldn't go through their property. So they're still left behind with their water. And that's some people that are waiting to be connected to the system because they can't depend on their wells.
I just want to add one thing, just to echo what Lucy and Susana are saying, which is that when she says we need to solve this problem, I just want to emphasize that we're not waiting for any kind of invention or technical breakthrough in order to solve these problems. We know how to get nitrate out of drinking water. We know how to get arsenic out of drinking water, and we know how to get 1,2,3 TCP out of water. And at least in the poorest rural communities in California, those are the big three, although there are other problems. But while there may be some emerging contaminants where the engineers are still figuring out what to do, we do not have any technical impediment. The only thing standing in the way of getting systems like West Goshen hooked up to a larger water system or getting treatment plants installed in communities that don't have safe drinking water is money. It is all about money. So when we talk about solving this problem, we talk about 4 years. It didn't take 4 years to figure out how to connect your system. It took 4 years to get your funding agreement, I'm sure.
Yes.
Right? Without even personally knowing it, I'm sure that's the case because this probably happened with a grant, right? A grant from the state of California. And while there are good people working in the State Water Board, Division of Financial Assistance trying to get state money out to help solve these problems, there just simply isn't enough of it, and the bureaucracy and the red tape takes forever. So what we need, and what Governor Newsom is talking about, and what we get when we bring litigation and go straight for it ourselves, is money. Money to build treatment plants, money to build pipelines and fix infrastructure, money to solve these problems.
I like to add to that. I agree we need money to fix it, but we also need proper resources and network and support to the governance structures that maintain the system. People that are running these systems need to be more like Lucy. People that are organizers that are trying to fix it and that know what to do, that we have proper water operators, right? So we need money, but then we need the right people in the governance space to make the better decisions so that we have reliable and affordable drinking water. And that we can solve that. We can solve this issue. But it's important that we work hand in hand and that we also control pollution. We have to stop and mitigate pollution so it's controlled and we don't continue to pollute our drinking water sources.
Okay, we have you here and then in the back. Great, and then over there.
Picking up on that point of pollution control right now, I'm wondering what you all think should be done to stop ongoing pollution, and in particular nitrate pollution, which continues to be pernicious throughout the state. And I'm wondering if, in particular, you, Todd, have contemplated suit against farmers for their liability for nitrate pollution in the same way you've gone after Shell and Dow for 123 TCP.
Yeah, great question. Yeah. Well, maybe I'll let you handle the part about how we reduce loadings of nitrate possibly and what policy stuff you're working on with respect to that. What I will say for my part in terms of the second part of your question is that I have gotten involved in some litigation involving nitrate, and it's been really complicated. And I have come away from that litigation with the conclusion that while the polluter pays principle is a critical component of solving the nitrate problem, that I don't think litigation is necessarily the most effective and efficient way to solve that problem. The way it is has been so efficient and effective with 123 TCP. And the reason is that both the legal and political challenges associated with holding particular agricultural operators liable for nitrate contamination are severe. The legal complications are primarily in the area of causation, proving that any one dairy or any one farmer or group of them is responsible for the nitrate contamination in a well, whether it's past practices or current practices, the science and then the money to support that science that's necessary to do that is very, very complex and very expensive. So and potentially could be unsuccessful. And then on top of that, I did get involved in a case briefly for a city in the Central Valley where just kind of everything, the wheels just came off before we even started. We got hired to do the case, and then 2 members of the city council who worked for a large agricultural outfit. The case was going to be against a big dairy. It was pretty obvious that the dairy was the source, but then 2 city council members who worked for a big agricultural company that wasn't a dairy got pressured by the dairy industry to start pulling back from the case, and we just ran away from it. It was looking horrible. And so at the end of the day, the policy solution that is, a few inches from the goal line right now of imposing a fee on growers and spreading those costs throughout the industry, something that the agricultural industry vehemently opposed a few years ago and is now at least, if not embracing, they're more open to it. But spreading those costs around, among the polluting industry, if you will, or among the agricultural industry, and using that money to fund nitrate treatment for communities, I think is a more efficient way to solve that problem. And I'm happy that Ag has come to the table.
And our organizations have been sitting at that table for, I think, 12 years now, negotiating with Ag. We've got them to commit to safe drinking water as the first solution to nitrate, to mitigating nitrate, and we're also working on developing water quality goals for Ag. It's going to take a long time. All the estimates we have are that it's going to be on the level of mercury, which we know contaminates most of the waterways in Northern California. So it's going to be more of a 50 to 100-year solution. So getting them to reduce and stop their over-fertilization is first on our list, all the way in the back.
Can you talk about some of the chronic health conditions that people who are exposed to 1,2,3 TCP experience?
That is a very difficult question to answer, and the reason is because the information that we have, the studies that have been done that have led to the stringent drinking water standard for TCP in California are all animal studies, rodent studies. There is no epidemiology. There is no study of its actual effects on human beings. We know what it does to mice and rats. And it ain't good. But we know that it causes lots of different types of cancers in all kinds of different parts of the body, and that's what leads toxicologists and risk assessors to the conclusion that it's a potent carcinogen in humans, because it didn't just cause cancer in one kind of species of rat in one part of their body, but caused all kinds of problems. But in terms of what it does to human beings specifically, there is really no specific science or scientific study that's been done on that. There has been virtually no litigation. There's one case I'm aware of where some people individuals alleged that their various health conditions were associated with exposure to 1,2,3 TCP. And I think the cancer patient in the group won his case, and people with a bunch of other conditions lost, if you can believe that. So there isn't a lot of information on it.
And I think one thing we found, and maybe you can talk about this, Susana, is trying to do epidemiological studies for contaminants that disproportionately impact small communities is extremely difficult because your population size is so small. Is that right?
That's correct.
You tried to do that a few years ago, right?
We did, and I kind of want to just bring it home. I think the reality we all need to be really aware of is that these contaminants and this type of reality disproportionately affects people of color, that the majority of our farm worker communities are based in the Central Valley, and they grow our food. And it's our hardest working families that are having to deal with these highest toxic water rates, and then exposed to TCP when they shower, and then make sure that their kids have safe drinking water when they go to school. So this constant stress adds to the reality that we live in. And then, on top of that, not all of us have health care. So how do you get the right proper diagnosis, right? So it is a systemic problem that we need to change. I will just add quickly on the regulations. It's important that we monitor those in power. The regional water boards in California are the agencies that regulate pollution. So the regional water boards, who sits on those, are really key. Because for a long time, Region 5, which is the one that governs the Central Valley, was very lenient. If anything, it allowed pollution to continue for groundwater, until we started to be very active with the regional water board to say, hey, we can't continue to allow pollution of our groundwater sources. We rely on that. So then slowly things were changing, but you have to be an advocate. You have to be at these agencies to ensure that people in office are doing a better job.
you have to have people like Lucy who show up at meetings. All the way back there with your hand up, yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering how the new Human Right to Safe Water advances evolve from the Safe Drinking Water Act and how, what we can do to help it get implemented, because it sounds like it's there now, but it's not working yet.
I'm going to try to answer this. So we have the Human Right to Water law that says that the state of California recognizes that all humans need to have access to safe water for sanitary purposes as well. Something like that, right? It was better before the original one. It's a good faith policy, but it has no teeth. So now we have to implement that. So how do we ensure that people have safe drinking water? Well, now we need to pass the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund. We need a permanent, reliable source of funding that we can use to ensure that our communities can tap into it so that we can have proper treatment. Because if we don't do that, what happens is, reality is our communities stay the same. We continue to be exposed to this type of condition, and when they have to increase water rates, do you really think people have to pay over $100 to bring in treatment? It's too unaffordable. So what we need to have is a reliable source of funding available that then we can prioritize our communities to tap into to ensure that we can use for operation and maintenance of these systems. We need that, and we can pass that this year.
Is that pending?
Yes, we're working on that, but yes, and we're gonna need your support.
Front row, second row.
Okay, so I think too much time has passed, and we cannot let this go on any longer. That's how I feel about it.
I agree.
So what I'm asking you is, last time with Jerry Brown, there was like a lot of stuff that went on, and I don't even know exactly the details. I know you guys do. So there's some of us ready to put some intense strategy and pressure, but we need guidance about where is the jugular vein? Because I don't want to wait any longer. I do not want to wait for this. This is like the scale of the birth of United Farm Workers, which I worked on when I was a teenager. And so when I saw or heard about the issue, it was so deeply disturbing, and I think it should be for everybody in the United States, not just California.
Well, the polling we've done shows that it's deeply disturbing to Californians. So we know that we have the support of the people, but sometimes politicians need a little nudging. I would say that the governor has made it a priority. The Speaker of the Assembly has made it a priority. So you should direct your attention to the Senate and the pro tem Senator Atkins of San Diego.
So if we could see a grid or a spread with the names and so that we could really get down to the granular level. We're ready for this network.
Happy to engage you. I'll give you my card. Okay, questions? Otherwise, I have a quick test for you. We've been talking about arsenic, TCP, and nitrate.
Jennifer, there was one more question over
Oh,
there.
I'm sorry. I knew I had to. Hang on 1 second. I'll catch you in a second. What's our time? Okay, great. So, which do you think is the most prevalent contaminant in California? TCP, nitrate, or arsenic? You have. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. It's a trick question. Okay. 1, 2, 3. TCP. Wow. Nobody. I'm sorry, Todd. You weren't a good salesman. Nitrate.
I want to lose this contest very
Arsenic.
badly.
Arsenic is correct. It's naturally occurring, and it's the #1 contaminant in California. So we didn't talk about it a lot, but it's also a potent carcinogen, and they're finding even more concerning information about its link to diabetes and heart disease at even lower levels. So had another question over here? Oh, I knew I was missing people over there. I'm sorry, it's this darn thing. Go ahead.
How do y'all see climate change affecting these issues? And I'm also curious if I could ask another question, how tenants versus homeowners are affected, how they fight, the barriers they face in fighting back.
I can take the climate change. So climate change is real, and our communities are in the front line. Our communities have adapted to a condition that no one needs to adapt to. We're adapting to high levels of contamination. We've adapted to a drought that took 5 years. Many of our residents for 2 years had no running water. We had to haul water to our casas. It was very expensive. Those are the conditions we've adapted to that we don't have to. So climate climate change is very real, and it's really impacting residents that are already having to deal with hard realities. And I really do think that we need to address and adjust and prioritize these areas and have a better response and prevent these types of disasters to always hit our communities first. You know, we always hear this term, the frontline communities. We are at the front line, but you know what? We're tired of it. We're tired of it. We don't want that anymore. No one needs to be in the front line of that kind of disaster. But I invite you all to come to the valley and see that. It is beyond, no one needs to live in that reality. And I can tell you, you know, seeing kids having to help their parents truck in water, having to use buckets to flush their toilet, just these things that are just unreal. And again, it's people of color. Why? So climate justice is what we need to have. We need to make sure they have proper planning, that we need to prevent these kind of things and ensure that we have sustainable communities that are living in a thriving area. You know, we always have the worst technology, the worst resources to our areas, and the reality is we need to make that equitable. And I mean, many of our comunidades say, you know, without us, you're not going to eat. And you know what? I got to say it's true. We're resilient people. If people have to grow and pick grapes in over 100 degrees, I'll tell you, we got to stop eating grapes. Cotton too. Why do we grow cotton when we don't have water? Why? Let's change the reality and prioritize drinking water. Things are changing. I'm sorry, we don't have almond milk. I'm sorry. Let's stop growing almonds. But what we consume in these bigger cities are affecting us in the valley. And you know what? Many of our residents don't even have access to that food. So it's a systemic cycle. So climate change is real. And to me, we got to stop that, and we have to ensure that we don't continue to condemn future generations to live in this kind of reality.
And I'm sorry, I forgot the second question. Who wanted to pick that up? Oh, yeah, renters versus homeowners.
Well, I had one thing on the climate change. I don't have much to say on the renters versus homeowners part in terms of my work, but one thing I'll say, not as based on the legal work that I do, but as a resident of the western side of San Francisco, one way that I think climate change comes into this discussion is it's likely to increasingly make some of the things we're talking about that are happening in the Central Valley increasingly, I think we're a long way from there still, but increasingly a risk and a reality for more people, even living in wealthier urban areas. We see in San Francisco, for example, very quietly, the San Francisco Public Utility Commission in the last couple of years, because of threats to surface water from the drought caused by lack of snowpack, lack of water, started reactivating old groundwater wells in Golden Gate Park that are filthy. And only certain parts of people in, frankly, more lower income neighborhoods in San Francisco now are drinking blended water with contaminated wells with nitrate.
We're going to fight about that one.
We are?
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
Got one. I'm sorry, but the Sunset is not a blighted neighborhood.
I didn't say it was a blighted neighborhood, but it's certainly lower income than Noe Valley, and it's where I live. But anyway, we can fight. My point about it is really the opposite point, which is that climate change is going to be a democratizing agent here, and we're going to see more and more water quality problems as we start running out of pristine water flowing out of the mountains. That's my point.
Sorry about that. So I think we'll get to you in 1 second. So the other thing is renters versus homeowners, and I think that's a huge issue. A difficulty is that a renter does not get the same notice as a homeowner, that a renter, if they complain about habitability, because if you don't have safe drinking water, you can say it's uninhabitable, and they can actually be evicted if there's no water or if there's not safe water. So that's an ongoing issue. I don't know how much you deal with that, Susana.
We actually have dealt with a lot of, we continue to have labor camps in the Central Valley, these areas, and they're really, and they're privately owned, and so you go into these communities and no one will say anything to you because they're afraid to say that they have bad water. And we already know they have really bad water, but everyone's quiet about it because the owner will just evict them. So it's a very sensitive issue, but it's very real. Yeah, and we continue to work on that.
Now, I kind of want to circle back around to Community Water Center and the way you function, because a few of us have worked in the Central Valley before you guys came into being, and it was really an uphill battle getting everything done. Let's just say that there's a lot of white men serving on a lot of boards in the Central Valley, and there's a lot of endemic racism. Monterey Park Track, where the governor visited, only exists because of racial covenants in the city of Modesto. So a lot of people talk about why do these communities exist? Why are they there? Well, a lot of them are there because they weren't welcome elsewhere. So I think that's a big issue. But I think the one great thing about Community Water Center is creating the community up, the grassroots activism has really helped you create things. And over time, you've made real changes, and your leadership academy is going to create even more in the future. So I'd like you both to talk about that.
You said it. I really believe that change needs to happen bottom up. Bottom up. People affected by a problem need to be at the forefront and at the table to talk about solutions. That is how you create sustainable change and authentic power. So you got to make sure that we have, you empower the base to understand that the reality we have is not okay. And there is opportunities for change. So for us, organizing was the baseline, the pipeline for power. If you can organize communities that feel forgotten and out of power, you organize them and you create power, things happen. Change occurs. Now, to sustain that, our policy is driven bottom up. Our policies that we work on are reflective of the need on the ground. And that's really important. So we're not just an advocacy organization, we're a grassroots organization, base building organization. And then on top of that, we really believe that leadership at all levels is critical. Good leadership. But on top of that, you have to have people at local water boards, on the regional water board and the state, with proper resources to continue to be a good decision maker. So we created another network called the Community Water Leaders Network, which targets decision makers on local water boards and city councils. And the idea is, because we do have an agenda, is to ensure that we create progressive water decision makers. That's what it is, and that we provide adequate resources, and that we let them know how to think about things from a progressive standpoint. So we give them a lot of information, but we're hoping that we can start changing that kind of mindset so that we have people like Lucy creating sustainable solutions.
Lucy, why don't you talk about your kind of evolution?
I've been a member with the Community Water Center for over a decade, and what I like about this is that most of us, we are more like a family now, because it's over 20 communities that we get together at the center every month. So we get to talk about what's the next steps that we could do to make sure that everybody has safe and affordable drinking water. So that's how we get informed, and that's how we take the information to our communities. And we let our community residents what the situations and how we could help to make this come true. And by me taking this information to my community, like the CCR report, that was something that we had never seen before till I got to meet with Susana at the Community Water Center. They showed me what it was, and a lot of times we don't even know how to read a CCR report.
Hang on, these people may not have read theirs either. Does anyone know what a CCR is? It's the annual water quality report that you get in the mail.
It's a consumer report where it tells you what contamination it's in your water and what's the limit, and if it's above the limit, then you're not in compliance. The water system is not in compliance. So that was something that we didn't know, and that was something that me as being the president of the Mutual Water Company, that was one of my responsibilities, to make sure that we had safe drinking water for our residents. And that was important to me and for my family. And me as a mother and a grandmother, I want the best for my family. And I don't want my grandchildren to have to go through all this. This is why we wanna make sure that we pass this, to make sure that everybody has safe drinking water soon, like right away. Like I'm saying, like this year, it can't be any more longer. We can't be waiting for this. This has to pass.
Okay, now another round of questions, right here at the front, and then we have a couple repeats, so we'll do that next.
I have two questions. One of them is regarding, how do you incorporate and include undocumented communities within all those like water issues that are happening? Because oftentimes I feel like they're forgotten, and also they're the most vulnerable when it comes to environmental impacts. And third, there's a big fear as to like, oh, well, I'm not going to get involved because maybe there's immigration. And that's something that comes
Great questions. So I will tell you that as an organizer, if you're a human, you need water. I don't care your legal status. So we organize on the baseline of that. Si tú tomas agua y tú pagas un mil del agua y quieres tener agua limpia, vamos a organizarnos, ¿no? That's the baseline. And as Lucy mentioned, through time, if you're able to talk to residents and give good information that they can understand, you inspire them you get them to do something about it, right? And then I think, as we continue to organize, we become familia. And when you're a familia, we're a unit. And so there has been threats of ICE. There was a situation in Cutler, northern part of Tulare, donde La Migra came, and they organized a big barbecue at the soccer park. Many of our families, we play soccer on Sunday. La Migra was there giving us a barbecue, and you know what? We got a call, and some of our members were taken away, but we mobilized right away. And that is the kind of stuff that when you organize and you create that kind of solidarity and trust, we're able to overcome things like that. And currently, this administration has also unlocked a lot of hate. And in the areas we live in, Tulare County, I hear, Tulare County is a very racist county. That is where we come from. That is a very racist. We have people driving with the Confederate flag. We have the Tulare County General Plan in 1970 that actually said, this is the planning document of the county. It actually said under the liquid and waste management element of the general plan, it listed 15 comunidades. Many of these I got the water sample from. It actually said that the county deemed these communities to have no authentic power, no authentic future. So therefore, the county was not going to invest public funding into their infrastructure. As an organizer, it was beautiful because guess where I went door knocking? The 15 communities. I was like, ¿qué cree? El condado dice que no tiene un futuro auténtico. It's not a coincidence that we live like this. You mobilize, and we got that. We removed that ordinance or that general policy, discriminatory policy, but that is what we call systemic racism. So back to your question, I don't care where you come from. Water is a human right. So that's how we organize, but we're also very sensitive. There's times where we have to go underground, and we don't have big platicas out in the park. We just do that in our houses. And so we're very, you have to be smart, too, because that's really real.
Susana, one of those 15 communities, West Goshen was one of them that was not in the plan. And not only that it wasn't in the plan, but because I was part of the general plans, West Goshen now is in the map.
Oh, yeah, so you weren't even on the list.
No.
Yeah, she wasn't on the list.
She wasn't enough
So I think we're getting ready to wind up. We have about 10 minutes left, I think, right? Just checking. So I knew I was around there somewhere. So what I wanted to do, instead of taking more questions, you'll all have time to talk to these folks one-on-one afterwards. I just kind of wanted to wind up and make sure that we kind of hit all the major points, which is we have a problem, we have a solution, and we're happy to share it with you. So just to move on, I think I'll start at this end and end up with you, Susana. Todd, do you have any closing points about your efforts and what would help you be more successful in your litigation work?
Well, it's been a terrific conversation and lots of really specific questions about detailed legal doctrine. I really appreciate that. I feel like I've covered everything I wanted to say. I will say, there are certainly new contamination problems that are constantly being uncovered, analytical methods that are getting refined, new standards that are coming down. So we will never run out of work to do in the groundwater contamination field, unfortunately, because we're just learning more all the time. But what I can say is that I have really dedicated myself to forging, doing something that not a lot of other people in my field do, which is really forging partnerships with groups like Clean Water Action and Community Water Center, looking at places where litigation and the policy can come together and work together, and I feel like it's been the start of hopefully a really successful partnership. We've seen some of the boards of our water system clients in the Central Valley really kind of turning around and becoming, kind of taking kind of consensus and common purpose around these water quality issues and really doing right for their community. And it's been very inspiring and turning water boards that into agents for social change in ways that they'd never been before. And so, I look forward to continuing to find ways for the nonprofit environmental justice community and for litigators to find ways to work together.
Lucy, I have a question. Is it going to be you, one of your daughters, or your granddaughter who is the first member of the Tulare County Board of Supervisors? You say it's going to be you.
I don't know. I can't give you that answer, but I'm really hoping that it would be one of my family because I know my granddaughters are even being part of this solution. So they made trips to the Capitol already, pushing this funding to pass because it's, like I said, I want everybody right here to invite you guys to be part of the solution. This is what we need in California, and it's a safe and affordable drinking water, and that's a human right. So it's time to implement, and let's do it. Sí se puede.
I've got a picture of myself with that. Send it to me. Susana, kind of wrap it up and give us some takeaways from this event.
It's widespread. This is a widespread problem. We can solve it. And we need your support to make sure that we pass the fund this year to implement the human right to water. How many of you agree that all Californians need to have safe drinking water? Raise your hand. Who's not raising their hand? All right, so all of you, we're going to need all your support to ensure we pass this. Be part of history. Join us in this fight to ensure that all Californians, and those of us that don't have that right now, are prioritized to ensure that we have safe drinking water. So if you want to continue to support the fund the movement, support our work, please check us out, follow up, get engaged, ask us more questions. Be curious about it, because we're going to need your support in the cities, the schools, to ensure that we make this a reality for all of us. Gracias. And it's good to see you, Tim.
And I just want to, before I thank our panelists, just to tell you we still have refreshments and outside. Hope you'll stick around and talk for a few minutes. And I just want to give a hand to all these wonderful panelists. You did a great job. Thanks for coming. Good night.